wind that night cut sharper than usual, slipping through my coat like it had purpose. Oak Street, normally quiet, felt almost abandoned beneath the dim, flickering streetlights. With each step, a gnawing unease settled deeper in my gut like I was being watched, but nothing was there when I looked. The air felt wrong, heavy, like it was holding its breath. I hunched forward, walking faster, eager to get back to the warmth of my apartment. My hands were buried deep in my pockets, shoulders tight against the cold. But as I neared the small park at the end of the street, I saw him standing by the fountain, still, too still, a tall man, unmoving, gazing into the water like he hadn't blinked in hours. It was far too late for anyone to be out. Every instinct I had told me to look away, keep going, but I didn't. I couldn't. Something about him froze me in place. Suddenly, the man turned his head, his eyes locking with mine. His gaze was unnaturally intense, and I felt a chill run down my spine, colder than the night air itself. I looked away quickly, heart hammering in my chest, but when I dared a quick glance back, he was gone, vanished into the darkness. The fountain, which had been eerily silent moments before, now let out a soft, rippling sound, as if it were disturbed by his presence. Shaking off the dread that had crept up on me, I continued walking. The last thing I needed was to get caught up in some late-night fantasy. But as I neared the end of Oak Street, something else caught my attention. The old library, its dark, looming silhouette, stood just across the street, bathed in the faint glow of a single, flickering street lamp. I'd passed by it countless times without ever thinking much of it. It was always closed, of course, but tonight, a sliver of light escaped through the crack of the library's massive front door. It was open. My curiosity, despite the unnerving feeling still sitting heavily in my stomach, got the better of me. I had never been inside. The building had always seemed more like a forgotten relic, overshadowed by the newer, brighter establishments in town. I approached cautiously, the wind whipping around me as I walked up the steps, and the door creaked eerily as I pushed it open. Inside, the library was even colder. The smell of old wood and dust filled the air, thick and suffocating. The faint glow of yellowed lights hanging from the ceiling barely lit the aisles of towering bookshelves, their contents hidden in shadow. The place was silent, almost unnervingly so, with not a single sound save for the soft clicking of the door behind me as it shut on its own. I paused, taking in my surroundings. Despite the quiet, the library seemed alive, like it was waiting, watching, breathing. The floor beneath my feet creaked with every step as I ventured deeper, drawn inexplicably to the farthest end of the room. My mind tried to rationalize what was happening, telling myself this was just a library, a quiet place to read or study. But there was an undercurrent of something darker at play. A sound broke my thoughts, footsteps, coming from the back. They were slow, deliberate, echoing through the hall. I froze, turning my head, my breath catching in my throat. A figure appeared at the far end of the room. A man, tall and thin, his features obscured by the dim light. His movements were stiff, almost mechanical, as he glided toward me with unnerving precision. As he approached, I realized he was the librarian. I hadn't seen him before, but there was something familiar about his presence. Maybe it was the way he moved, or perhaps the cold, calculating expression that lingered on his face. "Can I help you?" His voice was low, rasping, as though he hadn't spoken in years. It was the kind of voice that made your skin prickle with unease. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. I wasn't sure what I was doing there, or why I had wandered so far into the library in the first place. But I forced myself to speak, my voice barely above a whisper. I was just looking around. The librarian smiled a cold, unsettling smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "You're free to look, but be careful what you seek." There was a strange finality in his tone, and I felt my heart skip a beat. His words lingered in the air like an unspoken warning, but I couldn't bring myself to leave. Instead, I nodded and turned back toward the shelves, trying to shake off the feeling of being watched. As I wandered deeper into the library, the atmosphere seemed to shift. The light flickered overhead, casting strange shadows that danced along the walls. I couldn't help but feel that something wasn't right, that the library itself was alive, breathing, watching. Every step I took seemed to echo louder, as if the space around me was closing in. I pulled my coat tighter around myself, but the chill only seemed to deepen. After a few moments, I came across a narrow hallway that led deeper into the library. It was darker here, the air thick with dust, but what caught my attention was the door at the end of the hall. It was old, its wooden frame warped with age, and the faintest sliver of light shone through a crack at the bottom. I approached cautiously, drawn by an odd, magnetic pull that I couldn't explain. As I reached for the door handle, a sudden sound echoed from behind me. I spun around, heart hammering in my chest, but the room was empty. There was no sign of the librarian, no footsteps or voices, just silence. Shaking my head, I turned the handle and pushed open the door. The room beyond was small, cramped, and suffocatingly dark. Shelves lined the walls, stacked with books that looked older than time itself. The air smelled of mildew and decay. But there, in the center of the room, was a pedestal stone slab with an open book resting upon it. The book seemed out of place, its pages yellowed with age, the ink faded and smudged. It was almost as though it had been waiting for someone to discover it. Without thinking, I stepped closer. The moment my fingers brushed the pages, a chill ran through me. The temperature plummeted, and a strange hum filled the room, vibrating in my bones. The words on the page blurred, shifting before my eyes. I couldn't make out what it said, but I could feel a presence behind me, something watching, waiting. I spun around, but the room was empty. The librarian was gone. The air seemed thick with dread, and I felt my breath quicken. The silence was deafening. Then, the voice came. "You shouldn't have opened it." It was faint at first, a whisper that brushed against my ear, sending a shiver down my spine. But then, it grew louder, more insistent, as though the very walls were speaking to me. "You've unleashed it." A sudden crash echoed from the back of the room, and I spun toward the source, my pulse racing. The door, the one I had just come through, slammed shut, trapping me inside. My breath caught in my throat, as the shadows in the room seemed to twist and writhe. I stumbled back, knocking over a stack of books, the sound like thunder in the silence. The temperature continued to drop, frost forming on the walls. The book on the pedestal flickered in and out of focus, as though it were alive, its pages turning on their own. Panic surged through me, and for a moment, I stood frozen in place, my heart pounding in my chest. I needed to escape, but how? The door was still locked. The librarian's voice, a faint whisper now, seemed to come from everywhere. "You can't leave," it murmured. "You opened it, and now you belong to it." I swallowed hard, my hands shaking uncontrollably as I turned toward the pedestal. The book on it seemed to pulse, its pages rustling, as if alive, beckoning me to open it again. But I knew better than that. Whatever was in those pages wasn't something I could control. It was a force far beyond my understanding. I turned, searching frantically for a way out. My breath came in ragged gasps, and I could feel the temperature plummeting even further. My skin prickled with the sensation of being watched. I had to escape, or I would be trapped here forever. Just like the librarian, just like whatever else was lurking in the shadows. My eyes darted to the back of the room. The hallway was now shrouded in darkness, but the faintest sliver of light leaked from under a door at the far end. The door to the staff room, the librarian's office, perhaps. It had to be a way out. I rushed toward the door, stumbling over discarded books, my heart pounding in my throat. I reached for the handle, but before I could touch it, the shadows behind me seemed to surge forward, grabbing at my ankles, pulling me back into the dark. "No!" I screamed, kicking my legs, desperately trying to break free from the shadows that had grabbed hold of me. My pulse thundered as I tore myself loose and rushed toward the door. The air pressed in like ice, heavy with something unseen. Behind me, the librarian's voice rang out, low and final, "You can't leave." I didn't look back. I ran, heart racing, lungs burning, my footsteps echoing against the old stone floor. I could hear something following, too close. The exit loomed ahead. The door cracked open like a promise. I burst through it, the night air hitting me hard, sharp as broken glass. I staggered into the dark, gasping, my back to the building. But I could feel it, the library, watching, waiting. The door creaked shut behind me with a sound that felt too much like a warning. I was outside, safe. Maybe, but her voice clung to me like smoke. "You belong to it." The air felt colder, heavier, as if the weight of those words had followed me out. I stood there, heart still pounding, trying to convince myself it was over, that I had escaped whatever nightmare lay inside those walls. But deep down, I knew better. The library wasn't finished with me. It had let me go, for now, but not for good. One day, it would call me back, and when it did, I wasn't sure I'd have the strength to resist.